She thought she could erase my family's legacy with a gate and lock me out of my own cabin. Big mistake. What she didn't know was that the road she used to control the neighborhood sat on land my grandfather secretly owned. She wanted me gone, but forgot one thing. I'm the guy who pours foundations for a living, including the one her HOA fraud empire was standing, and turned her HOA kingdom into a living, rotting monument to her lies. What started with a violation notice ended with a confession, a resignation, and the smell of justice baked into every inch of her concrete prison. Stick around. This isn't just revenge. This is how you tear down corruption and build something better in its place. Now back up a few months. I was on a job site, mid-pour, concrete flowing like morning coffee, when I got the call. Grandpa Clyde had passed. My mentor, my blueprint, my fix-it-with-a-hammer philosopher was gone. But he left me something. The cabin we built together, tucked in a pine-covered hill where HOA bylaws should fear to tread. And he left one weird note. You own more than you think. Check the 1960 deed. I figured he was being poetic, or just messing with me from beyond the grave. The man once labeled a jar of nails spaghetti sauce just to confuse people. So I pull up to the cabin with a heavy heart and a truck full of tools, expecting a quiet weekend of nostalgia and maybe a loose squirrel or two. What I got instead was a woman in a pantsuit and heels, standing on my porch like she was auditioning to play Cruella de Vil's less charming cousin. Clipboard, measuring tape, and an energy that screamed, "I ruin birthdays for fun." Before I could ask who she was, she turned to me and hit me with, "I don't recall being notified of." Excuse me? I told her this was my property, that I'm Logan Brooks and my grandfather, Clyde Brooks, built this cabin before most of this town had plumbing. She narrowed her eyes like I'd just tracked mud on her emotional doormat and said, "Brooks? That name is not registered with Pine Hill HOA. All residents must be approved by the board. Ma'am, this place existed before your board was even born. It's got more history than your overpriced shrubbery." She smirked like I'd just asked her if mulch had feelings, and replied, "I'm Barbara Fitzwilliams, president of Pine Hill HOA. We'll need to review your situation immediately." Let me translate that she'd just declared war, with the tone of someone who's called the cops on lemonade stands. Fast forward 48 hours, and I've got 5 violation notices the next day for more. Driveway to industrial, vehicle to commercial, mailbox lacks community harmony. I didn't even have a mailbox yet. One of them just said, "vibe disruption." What does that even mean? My dog was confused. It's when my neighbor Dale stopped by with a 6-pack and the kind of look usually reserved for tornado warnings. He sat down and just said, "You're in it now, man. Last guy that questioned Barbara had his tires slashed and his sprinkler water reclassified as unauthorized utility. Apparently, Barbara had single-handedly driven out the Jacksons, the Sings, and a guy who accidentally asked if he could grow tomatoes. The horror. Each violation came with a sticky note and a hand-drawn smiley face. She was weaponizing cheerfulness. I expected the next one to say, "Smile! You're being evicted!" Now, I've handled a lot in construction. Faulty blueprints, clients who wanted more rustic but less wood, inspectors who think pencils are weapons. But I wasn't ready for HOA warfare on this level. Then I remembered Grandpa's note. Dug through an old metal toolbox labeled "No Karen Zone" and found a small rusted lockbox. Inside was a USB drive, a folded property deed from 1960, and a baggie of what looked like shattered car glass labeled HOA BS proof. Right then, it clicked. This wasn't just about lawns and mailboxes. Grandpa Clyde didn't leave me a cabin. He left me a minefield. And Barbara Fitzwilliams just stepped on it in heels. If you were me, what would you do with this HOA queen and her sticky note war? Comment below, because trust me, this gets dumber, dirtier, and a whole lot louder. Do you ever get fined for aggressive birdseed patterning or non-regulation breeze angles? I have. According to Barbara Fitzwilliams, aka the HOA's queen of control, my truck was visually hostile. My grass had too much ambition, and my bird bath encouraged reckless wing behavior. Every morning I'd wake up to another violation taped to my front door like some HOA version of The Purge. One day it was unapproved driveway slope. The next, gravel cohesion deficiency. I started to wonder if Barbara had a thesaurus, binoculars, and a personal vendetta. Now, I've handled difficult folks in my life. Had a guy once threaten to sue me because his garage cracked after he parked a forklift on it on purpose. But Barbara? She was in a league of her own. She fined me for excessive ruggedness, which, frankly, felt like a compliment. I got a letter that said, "Your property projects an unsettling pioneer aesthetic. Ma'am, it's a cabin, built by hand, by a man who survived 3 wives and 2 sinkholes." Dale stopped by again with another 6-pack, and that look you get when your neighbor becomes public enemy 1. He leaned in like we were swapping state secrets and whispered, "We don't say her name after sunset. Some say she once fined a kid for sidewalk chalk." I laughed, but he didn't. She made my niece cry over a flamingo, called it flagrantly pink. At this point, I was starting to think the violations were just a warm-up, and I found the map. I was digging through Clyde's old files looking for the original septic layout when I came across a county survey tucked behind a blueprint for a retaining wall that never got built. The map showed something Barbara had forgotten to mention. The main road into Pine Hill ran smack through Brooks' property. And I don't mean touches the edge kind of thing. I mean fully swallowed. Like a snake eating a hot dog. Turns out the developers back in the 70s never actually bought the land. They had an easement, permission to use it, but they never owned it. And guess who's now the owner of record? Yours truly. Meanwhile, Barbara was out here redrawing boundaries with the confidence of a Vegas card shark. The newer maps she'd submitted to the county showed the road as HOA property, conveniently nudging my cabin out of the neighborhood's official lines. I brought this up at the next HOA meeting, which felt less like a community gathering and more like a medieval tribunal. She stood at the front of the room in a blazer so stiff it looked like it had been laminated and said, "If you have concerns about the road, feel free to file a formal complaint in triplicate." I raised my hand and said, "Is that before or after I pay your imaginary toll?" She didn't laugh. No one did, except Dale, who coughed in a way that sounded suspiciously like the word dictator. 2 days later, Barbara issued a new rule via mass email and an announcement printed on what appeared to be HOA-branded parchment. Effective immediately, all residents must pay a $600 0 cents monthly road access preservation fee. Preservation? Of what? The pothole at the corner that's been there since Y2K? She claimed it was to maintain pristine conditions and protect infrastructure integrity. I nearly choked on my coffee. This wasn't just ridiculous, it was strategic. She wanted to push me out. That toll wasn't about money, it was about power. And I'll be honest, for a minute I felt boxed in, like I was trapped in a game I didn't sign up for, with a referee who also made the rules, played the game, and charged you for losing. But then I remembered Clyde's note. You own more than you think. He wasn't just talking about property. He meant grit, backbone. The kind of stubborn that turns into strategy. So I started planning, not just for payback, but for precision. Barbara wanted a war of paperwork and passive aggression. I was about to show her what concrete diplomacy looked like. Because here's the thing about easements. They go both ways. And if she thought she could fine me for existing, she hadn't seen what happens when the guy who owns the road starts charging rent. Stick around, folks. The next part's where the real mess begins, and you're going to want to hear how a few construction trucks, some rebar, and a little legal knowledge can turn a fake Queen's empire into a maze of misery. What would you do if your HOA tried to charge rent on a road they don't even own? Drop your revenge plans in the comments and make sure to keep watching, because this war's just heating up, and the best-smelling disaster is still to come. At this point, I wasn't sure if I was living in a neighborhood or starring in a Netflix HOA crime docuseries. I moved in expecting pine trees and peace. Instead, I got surveillance-level harassment, late-night threats, and a lady in a power suit who acted like she ran a cartel, but with worse ethics and better fonts. So one morning, I get this certified letter. Not an email, not a flyer, a certified letter, hand-delivered with a neon pink sticker that says, "Tick-tock, cowboy." Now, I'm not saying I was scared, but I did check my truck for explosives and my coffee for HOA-grade laxatives. The letter said I had 7 days to pay the road preservation fee or face limited access protocols. I laughed until I pulled out of my driveway and met the gate. Barbara had installed an electronic keypad gate at the entrance to Pine Hill. Big metal thing with more buttons than the dashboard of a fighter jet. Standing next to it, Barbara herself, sunglasses on, latte in hand, and a clipboard so thick it could have doubled as a lawsuit. She tapped the side of her cup and said, "You're not on the access list, Mr. Brooks. Pine Hill's roads are for compliant residents only." I blinked at her. "Ma'am, my cabin is up that hill." She sipped her drink like she was tasting justice. "Then you'll need to make alternate arrangements. Perhaps a membership payment will help your memory." It took everything in me not to test the tensile strength of her clipboard with my boot, but instead I parked my truck on the public side of the gate and hiked 2 miles uphill like a contractor turned mountain goat. I slipped on moss, got attacked by a pine cone, and was pretty sure a chipmunk gave me the finger. When I finally got to the cabin, sweaty and furious, I found a lovely surprise waiting on the front door. A bright orange tag that said, "Power suspended for non-compliance with regional service alignment." Translation? Barbara had convinced the utility company to evaluate my connection. So now I've got no road access, no power, no mail, and apparently no rights unless I Venmo Queen Barbara a road toll. I light a lantern, sit at Grandpa Clyde's old workbench, and try to remember why I haven't turned this cabin into a catapult and launched myself out of here. That's when I spot something. A faint line in the concrete floor, right by the old tool cabinet. It's subtle, like someone tried to hide it. I pry it open and find a compartment. Inside, a safe. Now, Grandpa always said, if it's worth keeping, it's worth sealing in concrete. I pop it open, and inside is a treasure trove of what I'd call pure HOA kryptonite. A confession letter written in shaky penmanship, surveillance screenshots printed from an old home security system, and a county map marked in red ink showing Barbara's private HOA zone sitting squarely on Brooks' land. Turns out, Grandpa had receipts, detailed, dated, color-coded receipts. He'd documented everything, her boundary shifting, her zoning adjustments, even a signed letter from a former board member who quit after calling Barbara's leadership legally questionable and morally tragic. It was like stumbling onto the diary of a suburban Bond villain. If Bond used newsletters and overbilled road repairs, I just sat there, holding that letter, hearing Clyde in my head go, "Told you, boy, never trust a woman with a clipboard and no sense of humor." But it wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't about fines or gates. It was about power. Barbara wasn't just running a neighborhood cult with printed letterhead, and I had the documents to prove it. So now the question wasn't if I'd fight back. It was how, and I had a few ideas involving rebar, concrete, and just the right amount of public embarrassment. She might have locked me out of my road, but she had no idea she just handed me the keys to her downfall. If someone cut your power and blocked your road, would you file a complaint or concrete your revenge? Tell me in the comments. And don't miss the next part, because Barbara's about to meet civil engineering vengeance with a smell she'll never forget. I came to Pine Hill for peace, maybe some nostalgia and a decent cup of coffee. What I got instead was a sobbing neighbor, a safe full of scandal, and a folder titled Barbara's Greatest Sins, which honestly sounded like a Lifetime movie no one asked for. If I'd known Clyde was running a personal FBI archive under his cabin floor, I would have brought popcorn. It started when Tom knocked on my cabin door, holding a grocery bag that clinked like it contained either beer or emotional damage. Turns out it was both. He walked in, sat down at the old table like a man about to confess to a priest, and dropped a bomb that made my stomach fall through the floor. "Barbara killed my sister," he said just like that. Then he pulled out a photo. Young woman, bright smile, scrubs, name tag. Emily Sullivan, RN. 10 years ago, she was walking home from the hospital. Barbara was drunk, leaving some HOA gala. Hit her doing 60 and never stopped. I just stared at him, mouth dry, mind racing like a squirrel on espresso. Then Tom said, "Your grandfather saw everything. He was working late on that retaining wall, caught the whole thing on his security cam. He kept the video. For justice. For the day someone could finally do something." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about power-hungry HOA nonsense anymore. This was about a cover-up wrapped in beige paint and HOA newsletters. Barbara wasn't just overstepping boundaries. She'd paved her way into power over a girl's body and buried the truth under road maintenance fees. Tom handed me a folder marked confidential, property lines and mask, HOA nonsense, which, in classic Clyde fashion, contained the most well-organized digital takedown I'd ever seen. Photos, timestamps, county records, a statement from a now-vanished board member, and my personal favorite, a spreadsheet showing $37,000, 0 cents in mailbox alignment therapy. Therapy for mailboxes. There was also a document labeled Road Paving Emergency Invoice that billed $12,000, 0 cents for 2 bags of concrete and a Subway party tray. Somewhere in the pile was a county zoning map showing Barbara had moved the HOA boundary lines 20 feet over Brooks' land, and conveniently forgot to tell anyone. And then came the final twist. Tom slid a private investigator license across the table like a poker card. "I've been watching her for 10 years, he said. "Your grandpa and I made a deal. He'd keep the evidence safe, I'd stay close. But I couldn't act until someone with legal standing showed up. That's you. So here I was, holding years of murder cover-up evidence, HOA embezzlement spreadsheets, and emotional trauma disguised as friendly neighbor chats. Felt like I'd inherited a cabin and accidentally activated a civil war. Meanwhile, Barbara's out there sending me citations for non-compliant porch rust. I had 2 choices. I could go full nuclear and drop everything in front of the cops, the news, and every HOA forum from here to Arizona, or I could play it smart, play it Brooks style. I chose smart, but not quiet. You see, when someone builds their power on lies, the most effective revenge is to slowly pull each nail out of their empire, one by one, until the whole house collapses with a gentle thud and a faint scent of guilt. So I started planning. With Tom, Clyde's notes, and enough HOA dirt to start my own tabloid? Should Grandpa Clyde have worked for the FBI? Let me know in the comments. And whatever you do, don't miss the next part, because the HOA Queen's throne is about to be yanked out from under her, one concrete block at a time. I called it a construction incident. OSHA might call it performance art. Barbara called it a personal attack. I called it Tuesday. When you've been blocked from your own land, hit with fake fees, and handed murder footage in a Ziploc bag, you stop asking for justice. You start pouring it. So here's what happened. I called in a favor from my old Marine buddy Danny, who now runs a trucking outfit and owes me 3 life debts and a dinner. I asked him for 3 trucks loaded with concrete forms, steel beams, and just enough attitude to make it all look like a very unfortunate accident. One early morning, those trucks rolled up to the HOA gate like tired circus elephants. And wouldn't you know it, right at the Pine Hill entrance, the lead truck tragically threw a front axle. Boom! Steel everywhere. Like God sneezed in a rebar factory. Truck 2 jackknifed, trying to avoid it. Concrete forms tumbled like Tetris blocks from hell. Truck 3, loaded with quick mix cement, politely blocked the rest of the road like it was paid to do so. Residents started backing up, horns, screaming. One guy in a robe banging on his window with a spatula. And there I was, vest on, clipboard in hand, pretending to assess the damages. Officer Martinez rolled up and asked if I needed help. I told him, "Oh, it's bad, officer. We're going to need slow cleanup, deep inspection, probably a few donuts." Barbara arrived next, sunglasses on, hair trembling with rage. She took one look at the pile of steel chaos and barked, "This is sabotage. Move this junk immediately or I'll call the National Guard." I sipped my coffee. Oh, Barbara, you wouldn't want to violate Municipal Safety Code 14.2, you know, blocking inspection of load-bearing materials. She made a sound somewhere between a hiss and a lawnmower starting in reverse. But the best part? While the HOA residents panicked over their immobilized luxury SUVs, I got to work. Using the spilt forms and beams, I started building 12 concrete planters. Big ones. I'm talking 8-foot cubes filled to the brim with quickset and vengeance. But these weren't just decorative galoba. Oh no. Inside each, I installed a strategic mix of ginkgo biloba, smells like barf, Bradford pear trees, smells like fish funeral, and Titan arum bulbs, literal corpse flower, fertilized with liquid fish guts, nature's revenge cocktail. And just to make sure everyone knew this was intentional, I bolted bronze plaques on each one. Brooks Beautification Project, S. 1960, restored, 2024. That smell, that was the scent of historical preservation. By day 3, the planters had been arranged in a perfect slalom across the entrance. Emergency vehicle legal spacing? Check. Traffic slowdown to 5 mph? Check. HOA pride shattered in front of a Channel 9 news crew? Absolutely. The news anchor literally called it community blocked by 15 tons of steel, mayhem, and bad decisions. Couldn't have said it better myself. Barbara, not one to take humiliation quietly, attempted a counterattack with her Lexus. She revved up like she was about to star in the next Fast and Passive-Aggressive, aimed straight for the narrow gap and floored it. The car made it exactly 1.7 feet before her undercarriage tapped one of my planters like a bell. Instant defeat. Her engine wheezed, her pride exploded. She got out and screamed, "This is a hostile act of architectural warfare!" And I said, "Ma'am, it's called landscaping. Maybe read your own handbook." Now the neighborhood's cheering. One guy yelled, "This is better than Netflix," and offered me a bratwurst from his backyard grill. Barbara, meanwhile, filed a lawsuit for obstruction and emotional distress. I filed that nonsense under L for LOL. Turns out when you build your empire on lies and HOA fees, you don't want to pick a fight with a man who literally pours permanence for a living. Have you ever wished you could trap a Karen in a concrete maze? What flower would you have planted in the HOA planters? Let me know in the comments, and whatever you do, don't miss what's coming next. Barbara's about to go viral for all the wrong reasons. If you've never smelt rotting ginkgo fruit, corpse flowers, and fish emulsion in 90-degree heat, congratulations, you haven't declared war with a garden. Me? I weaponized landscape like it was 1944 and Barbara was trying to occupy Normandy. That smell? It hit people like a ghost slap. One lady clutched her pearls and muttered, "It smells like sin and old shrimp." Mission accomplished. By day 8, the ginkgo trees were dropping their fruit bombs like Mother Nature had beef. Bradford pears bloomed like fish funerals in the breeze, and the Titan arum, God bless it, was swelling up like it had vengeance in its pollen. The UPS guy took one step past the gate, gagged, and said nope. Amazon marked the neighborhood undeliverable. The pizza joint left a voicemail that sounded like a hostage negotiation. "We'll meet you at the gate with a box and hope." Barbara, she was unraveling faster than a dollar store garden hose. She showed up at the planter line in full makeup and a rage aura, stood in front of a Channel 7 news crew, and said with a straight face, "This is HOA terrorism. He's using plants as weapons." The anchor blinked, probably questioning her career choices, and asked, "Are you saying you've been attacked by landscaping?" Barbara, without missing a beat, screeched, "Those flowers are biological hazards. My Mercedes still smells like anchovy death." That night, Pine Hill held an emergency HOA meeting, and the turnout was Olympic. Neighbors packed the clubhouse like it was a live taping of Survivor Suburbia. Barbara walked in wearing her signature blazer of doom, but this time something was different. People didn't lower their heads anymore. They turned. They stared. And one brave guy in the back shouted, "Your landscaping smells like lies." Barbara stepped to the mic and started rambling about community purity and scent-based sabotage, but every word dug her grave deeper. The Hendersons whispered to the Jacksons. The Garcias passed a folder marked property tax funny business. People were waking up and sniffing the corruption. One mom stood up and said, "My kid can't ride his bike through the stench. We moved here for the trees, not a botanical crime scene." Then it happened, mid-rant breath. Her long-suffering husband, the bobblehead lawyer, stood up, walked to the front, and dropped a manila envelope on the podium. "I'm done," he said. "Done covering, done enabling, done smelling like legal guilt and fish. I knew about Emily. I helped you hide it. I've hated myself every day since." Barbara froze. For once, she didn't have a comeback. Her eyes blinked in slow confusion, like a dial-up modem trying to load guilt. Then her body slumped like a wilted daffodil in an ethics drought, and she sat down hard in the HOA chair, stunned into silence for the first time since the 2007 mailbox color dispute. The room erupted, not into chaos but into truth. Neighbors stood one by one, listing every injustice she'd handed out like Halloween candy. $200 0-cent fines for wind chimes, letters about garbage bin posture, a citation for non-compliant lemonade stand signage. People were done, not just with her, but with what she represented: fear, control, and the weaponization of petty. I didn't even need to say anything. I just sat in the back, sipping a soda someone handed me like a victory drink. The concrete planters had done their job, but it was the rot underneath, the lies, the manipulation, the corpse flower secrets that really undid her. Have you ever seen someone lose their spouse, reputation, and HOA empire in one meeting? What would you have shouted in that room? Let me know in the comments. And don't go anywhere, because the final demolition hasn't even started yet. And trust me, it's personal. Barbara waddled into my cabin like she still ran things. You know that walk? That stiff-shouldered denial strut like she's entering a courtroom instead of the place she once tried to cut off power to? Her makeup was hanging on by a thread, and her heels had done a death march through 2 miles of guilt and fish fertilizer. By the time she hit my porch, the Queen of Pine Hill looked less like royalty and more like a sitcom villain who just lost her season arc. I didn't say a word. She just turned the laptop around and hit play, and the screen lit up with the grainy footage. Barbara in 2014, stumbling out of her Lexus, face lit by the dome light, looking down at someone, on the ground. Then she drives off. No hesitation, no phone call, just a slow, panicked exit into the night like a guilty ghost with leather upholstery. She stared at it for a full minute before whispering, "Oh God, I thought it was a deer." Yeah, with scrubs and a name tag. That's when Tom stepped through the back door like karma with a backpack. He looked at her like she wasn't even human. "You killed my sister," he said, calm as a snowstorm. Barbara's knees buckled. For a second, I thought we'd need smelling salts. But I wasn't here for tears. I was here for closure. Cold, calculated, concrete-style closure. I laid out her options like a buffet of consequences. Option 1, public confession, full restitution to every family she wronged, $500 0-cents, K2 Emily Sullivan's Memorial Fund, and permanent exile from Pine Hill. Option 2, the footage goes viral. Barb the Backyard Butcher starring in every local and national news cycle for the next 6 months, plus a documentary, maybe even merch. Her choice. She stared at me, lip trembling, and whispered, "My children, they can't know. Please, don't let them know." Tom didn't flinch. "Emily never got to be a mother," he said, voice sharp enough to etch stone. Barbara grabbed the pen like it weighed 1,000 pounds and signed the confession letter I'd already printed out. One signature, one crumbling ego, one overdue apology sealed in ink and silence. She sobbed into her sleeve like a busted pipe. Me, I felt nothing. No joy, no pity. Just that heavy stillness you get after pouring the last layer of concrete, when everything's flat, solid, and done. The next evening, Barbara stood at the podium for the last time. Her voice cracked as she listed every sin in order, like a grocery list from hell. Harassment, embezzlement, falsified records, abuse of power. At the back of the room, neighbors gasped like a choir. When she named the families she'd run off, even Brad looked like he wanted to file another set of divorce papers just to be sure. Tom was voted in as the new HOA president with zero opposition. The man could have asked for a crown and a pizza oven in the clubhouse, and folks would have delivered both before sunrise. Pine Hill had been reborn. But my job wasn't finished. Not yet. If someone begged you for mercy after 10 years of power abuse, would you hand them tissues or shovel more dirt? Let me know in the comments, and don't blink, folks, because the final chapter's coming next, and my last surprise? Oh, it's built to last. The barriers stayed. The flowers bloomed. The HOA dissolved like a sugar cube in hot vinegar. And me? I became the Bob Ross of suburban vengeance. Happy little trees, angry little lawsuits. My cabin wasn't just mine anymore. It became the headquarters for Pine Hill's rebirth, and a monument to what happens when concrete meets karma. We turned that cabin into something Grandpa Clyde would have fist-pumped over: the Emily Sullivan Youth Construction Center. Local teens showed up with zero experience and a whole lot of attitude, and we handed them hammers and blueprints instead of citations and threats. In week 1, 2 kids poured their first slab and wrote justice in the wet cement with a stick. One accidentally wrote it backward, but hey, the sentiment was permanent, just like the smell of Barbara's HOA tenure. People donated supplies, contractors volunteered time. Even Brad, the ex-husband, dropped off tools and said, "Figured they'd do more good here than in my garage." Meanwhile, the internet went nuclear. The video titled HOA Karen vs. Concrete, Smell Justice Served Cold, hit 100 million views in a week. A week. Comments rolled in from every corner of the earth. Come to my neighborhood. Can Brooks Construction make HOA-proof mailboxes? Please launch a line of HOA escape kits. I even got a fan edit set to the Mission Impossible theme showing Barbara's Lexus bouncing off my planters in slow motion. But here's what hit me hardest. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. Folks weren't cheering because I won. They were cheering because I rebuilt. They saw a guy take pain and use it to lay foundations, literal ones, the kind that don't crack under pressure. One woman commented, "My son and I watched this together. Now he wants to be an engineer instead of a YouTuber." Thank you. Yeah, that got me. Harder than a citation for unauthorized mailbox texture. Then, late one night, I was sipping coffee on the cabin porch when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, "Saw your story. Can you help me with my HOA? I promise I'm not another Barbara." I looked at it, cracked my knuckles, and laughed. Brooks Construction is officially open for HOA counseling. I said to no one in particular, but I imagined Grandpa Clyde somewhere nodding in agreement, probably with a wrench in one hand and a concrete trowel in the other. I turned to Tom, who was installing solar lights around the youth center's new garden. "What do you think, man? Should we offer a premium Karen repellent plan?" He looked up, smirked, and said, "Only if it comes with a lifetime supply of stink trees. Here's the thing, concrete's permanent. So are consequences. But people can rebuild, they can grow, they can plant better things where the old rot used to live. I don't believe in happy endings, but I do believe in strong foundations, and sometimes the best revenge is turning your pain into a place where others find peace." What should Brooks Construction charge for HOA revenge packages? Would you sign up for a platinum package with optional legal mulch? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and remember, revenge is sweet, but rebuilding better? That's the part that really sticks. If this story hit you somewhere between the funny bone and the backbone, if you've ever had to fight for what's yours or felt trapped in someone else's kingdom of nonsense, this story was for you. Because sometimes the biggest wins come not from breaking people down, but by building up what they tried to destroy. If you liked how we poured poetic justice, dropped some real-deal life lessons, and maybe made you laugh or think, drop a comment below. What would you have done if someone tried to concrete block your life? Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what we've got cooking next. There are more stories coming, more takedowns, more rebuilds, and more reminders that legacy beats ego. every time. Thanks for watching. Now, go build something that lasts.